On, unfixed, bayonet.
I've been a reenactor for about 30 years. As a historian, I've really liked the notion of reenacting because what it does for historians that participate in it, it gives us a sense of what was going on within the pages that we read. We could do our research, we get diaries, we get after-action reports, and we tend to write our history according to the documentation. But then the sights, sounds, smells, images, history is not just documentation, it's also needs the imagination. And that's what reenacting does for the person interested in history. So for historians participating as reenactors, it gives a first-rate example to develop our imaginations to understand the documents better. For the viewing public that comes out, what we try to give them is a cornucopia of sights and sounds and visual images that they could take with them back to their reading of the Civil War. They could see the three arms going through their motions. For the infantry, they could see infantry formations of what would be actually a large company, but we go through battalion maneuvers so they could see why an infantry battalion split into several companies would maneuver into column, go into a battle line, why an infantry battalion would be in a two-rank line, elbow to elbow. We fire by volley. And so they could hear the crash of the musketry go off in a volley, but then they could count the seconds of how long it takes us to reload. And it's the time it takes to load that causes us to fight in the close order that we do. And if they observe what's going on there, they can understand that if you fight in a spread out formation, you're not going to put enough lead in the air to convince the enemy to run away. Then the cavalry, another thing, we're really fortunate and blessed to have the 8th Illinois as part of our brigade. They have a good-sized mounted contingent as well as dismounted. So they get to see the cavalry go through their paces. The mounted unit, they get to see the maneuvering of the horses. If they take a closer look at what's going on with the mounted, they'll see that those mounted troopers have living beings that they are riding upon, not motorcycles. And if they look carefully, as the musketry goes off, the cannons boom, those horses, they respond, and they're living beings. And so they get appreciation for the fact that the troopers have to control their mounts. And sometimes they don't always cooperate. So yesterday, for instance, we had one trooper thrown from his saddle. And he had to get right back up on the horse, let the horse know the what for, that he's in charge and not the horse. And so one thing that people could see when they see the mounted is they start to understand how that works, and that these troopers are riding real living beings with a mind of their own. And I think they could gain a closer appreciation for what it would take to have 500 to 1,000 troopers in formations. Then we have the artillery and the artillery arm, and we had 6 guns yesterday. We'll have 6 guns today. We have a variety of artillery pieces out there too. We have 6-pounder, bronze 6-pounder. We have a couple bronze Napoleons that are from the Civil War. This particular Napoleon gun howitzer is named Molly. And it's actually stamped in the barrel, and this gun was used during the Civil War. And so the crew that serves this gun has a special kind of identity that this was used during the Civil War. That's really special for reenactors. It would fire solid shot, and the solid shot had a 2.5-pound bag of powder attached to the end of it. It was all a single piece of ammunition, and they would put that in when they fired that solid shot. that would go about a mile, about 1,800 yards. But they could also do it as bounding shot, where they would fire it shorter and it would hit the ground. It hit first and go about half distance again, hit, hit, and hit. This would be a 12-pound shot, would be a lot more effective than a 6-pounder. A 6-pounder would take out a couple guys in a file. If this round took out a couple guys, there'd be a lot of devastating splatter, and it would tend to demoralize. The other thing about bounding solid shot is you could actually see it come, which was nerve-wracking, even if you weren't hit. The other kind of ordnance that this fired was a shell, which was a hollow, round shot, but had powder in it. And they would elevate the piece and fire that out, and it would be timed to explode in front of the enemy formation and then break open, and the hot lead would then fall. Gravity would take it the rest of the way and fall upon your enemy. Of course, then you have canister, and the canister of the 12-pound Napoleon had 27 1-inch iron balls that would go out and spread and take down the infantry as if it was like a shotgun. It's often described as a shotgun. They would also double canister and get 2 of those canister rounds in the tube when the infantry got within 200 yards.
First Illinois Brigade of Volunteers originated here in Illinois, in the Chicago area, right after the war began in late April. It was formed and sent down by train to Cairo, where they were trained and then placed into the regular army. This is a brigade headquarters manned by a brigadier general. All the numbers of the aggregate men are brought here. The need for ammunition, need for food, wood, hay, fodder, it all comes here. And then that paperwork is then dispatched out for supplies. My column, if I had 25 to 30,000 men, my column would stretch 3-4 miles. After that, then you had the supplies, which could be another 4 or 5 miles. If there was a battle involved, when that battle is over, then the work begins here at brigade. All the reports come in. Every officer has written a report on what he experienced during the battle. We would be going over that. I would write my report. I would submit it to my boss, who would then do the same, read everything, submit his own report, then it would go to the next boss. If the battle ended at 6, by 1 o'clock in the morning, we would be having a big officers' call of general staff. The main general would decide what's happening tomorrow. He would write his orders, and then it would come down, and finally I would probably get my orders of what I'm doing the next day about 3 in the morning. So I have to write my orders for that when these guys wake up at 5, that they have orders to what to do next. when he's out there on the battlefield. Really doesn't know what's going on, can't see what's going on. It's to move forward. Don't stop. Keep the man to your left and to your right, shoulder to shoulder. If someone falls, don't stop to help him, move forward.
I'm an American Civil War bugler, a reenactor. Used to play trumpet for many, many years and got interested in Civil War bugling from my ex-trumpeting. I'm holding in my hands about an 1880s rotary valve trumpet. The rotary valves are much like French horn valves. They allow for you to play notes or tunes, and they were used in American Civil War bands. The importance of the bands in the American Civil War was to remind them of home and the loved one and the fact that they didn't have to be facing disease and dying and starvation every single moment of their lives. It was a way for them to relax and escape the dreary drudgery of the American Civil War. This is a trumpet. The bugles and trumpets were used as camp clocks. The camps had tens of thousands of men in them, and to get them to wake up and eat and go to bed and get together for drill at the same time was paramount to good organization and the efficiency of the practice and the drill of the troops. On the battlefield, we also use the bugles to signal troops to move. A single bugler can cut through the chatter and be heard at a half mile to a mile distance. And so the different calls that were used on the bugle were things like forward march and halt, start firing and stop firing, cease fire. They had calls for skirmishers to stand up and lie down, to run, to move to the left, to move to the right, to turn or wheel to the left and right. They had calls to form square, and they had calls to run like the Jesus and get out of there, and they also had the calls to retreat in an orderly fashion. So what we do on the battlefield is we emulate those calls and we bugle on the battlefield to direct the troops as they did back in the 1860s. The 24th Wisconsin had a very famous band, and one morning they told the buglers to sleep in and enjoy it. And they played a very famous tune called the Old 100th for Reveille at 6 in the morning. Of course, everybody knew the words to the tune, and soon the entire division of 6,000 soldiers was up and singing, and I guarantee you there wasn't one dry eye in the bunch.
When you see men out there reenacting, each man probably represents 50 men. We have lawyers, we have doctors, all lines of life, as it was back then, are in our ranks. We have cooks, we have ex-military, everything from a master sergeant in the Marine Corps to a naval commander. And they're privates.